afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our office hours. It is Wednesday. It's 4:30. My name is Johan. I'll be your host for the next hour here. Still waiting for a few more people to join in. I just started the meeting here, so give it a minute or two, and then we will get going. All right. Just gonna give a minute or two here before we get started. All right. In the meantime, feel free to post any questions you might have in the Q&A function or in the Zoom chat feature as well. The Q&A is a little bit easier for me to monitor since they actually stay there until I can go ahead and answer them. But otherwise, I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat as well, together with messages from Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and something else. 4 streams going. But I think we are ready. Oh, yes. Yes, we are. Okay. Start a local recording. I'm going to start the streaming. And I'm going to verify real quick that we are actually live. Kind of hard to do on my own otherwise, but oh yeah, shows up nicely on my phone. So I take that as a good sign. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our office hours here at the ViaMonstra Academy. My name is Jan Abdmark. I will be your host for the next hour. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have on Windows 10, Windows 11 deployments, ConfigMgr, Intune, MDT, and most things related to that. This is things I've been working with basically my entire adult life. And as usual, I may not have seen everything, but I've seen a lot. So if you do have a question on mind, don't hesitate to ask it. I'm trying to keep an eye on the various streams that we have. We have YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn running at the moment. And of course, for those of you that are joined the Zoom meeting, well, here we are. I got a question on YouTube about volume. Can you guys hear this okay? Just out of curiosity, if you can give some confirmation in the chat there. See the audio bar showing up nicely. So I'm taking that it's working okay. Perfect. Thank you for the confirmation. All right. Well, let's see what questions we have for the day. So Christian had a question. Is the built-in WSUS cleanup checkbox good enough, or do we need additional cleanup scripts, including SQL reindex, maintenance jobs, etc., for WSUS? So that is obviously a ConfigMgr question, and I'm going to bring up that screen real quick and also switch over to that so you have a remote chance of seeing stuff. That was not the one. That was not the one either. Here is the one. I'm using a Stream Deck next to me and try to remember what buttons that goes to which, but you should be able to see the screen okay. For the ones that are live, for those that are in the Zoom call, we will obviously have the screen right away. But anyhow, if I open up one of my site servers and go to my console and go over to the administration of software update points. So in the relatively new maintenance tab that was added in a while ago, first of all, it's absolutely key that you have added this one here. Otherwise, you will find out that ConfigMgr won't be able to do a very good cleanup job at all for WSUS. But these other options here, they do work, they do a nice work, but what they do not do, they don't combine software update groups, they don't do additional cleanup, you may do different components, and I usually recommend to at least add some sort of community solution on top of what ConfigMgr offers out of the box. So as a start, I do recommend to put in some sort of maintenance solution for reindexing. That also is, of course, not just for ConfigMgr, but also the SUS DB itself. So Ola Hallengrens is a really good one. DBA tools, I see, is quite common as well. So I recommend using that and put that on the schedule. Other than that, you can use, I wrote a blog post back in 2018. You guys might remember that Microsoft released a patch back then that kind of forced every single client to re-download the entire catalog, and that caused some interesting things to happen. But that ended up in the blog post about what to do if you start to run into troubles. And the first one was basically, all right, buy you some time by throttling down what WSUS can actually use in the application pool. And then started to look into, okay, what can be done from a WSUS point of view to make it a bit more resilient? So it turns out that Cherokee Kissinger and Jeff Cameron, that both works at the what's known as a large bank or big bank on Twitter, they have quite a few software update points because they manage about 400,000 devices in their environment. And those recommendations tend to work out really, really well, even for smaller ConfigMgr environments running software update points. So what I put together here is a little script, PowerShell script, that just puts in better settings for the software update point or points in your environment. If you haven't seen this one, I will put that link in the chat for you guys. There you go. This is, in my opinion, a better default array of things. Queue, memory usage, and other good stuff that you need to have. But I also recommend to find some sort of community solution. And the two that I've been using is one from Brian Dam, Damn Good Admin. I have it listed here. This one. And this one is being updated every now and then, but this is a good PowerShell script. So I will put that in the chat as well. And then the other one from Jeff. I can't even spell Jeff. This is going great. This solution here. So This just takes you directly to the download, but I'll put that in the chat as well. Just not going to click it. I'm going to copy the link instead. Because the beautiful things with Jeff scripts in particular, and this is something we normally cover in our courses, but I'll be happy to show you what it looks like. So let's see where I put that one. Here. I like it about the F script is that it does a what if mode or supports a what if mode. So like a trial run equals true. And I can tell that script what stuff that I don't care about. Do I care about updates for Internet Explorer 8? Probably not. 2003 updates? Probably not. XP updates? Probably not. Then I can simply run this script, and it's going to give me a little bit of an insight to how my environment is doing. It runs fairly quickly, and it gives me a little bit of summary in the end. And you can see that this lab is not okay at all. I have almost 500 updates that are superseded that are older than 90 days. I definitely don't need those. I have 48 preview updates. I don't deploy any previews in this lab. I don't need those. I have 400 some ARM updates. In this lab, I don't deploy any ARM64 devices or have even ARM64 devices. So therefore, I don't need those updates. And using scripts like this, I think, is a good practice to simply add a little bit of extra love into your software update point, because the default maintenance is simply not good enough. The default settings are, in my opinion, not good enough, but they are fairly easy to change. There is a lot of information out there in the community for this. If you really, really, really want to learn what's going on behind the scenes, my good friend Jordan Bensing, who recently joined Patch My PC, he did a really good video, which they have on their YouTube channel. So I'm just going to need to find that one real quick. Should be this one. So videos, yes. And here is almost a 2-hour session on WSUS maintenance alone and some other good stuff. So if you haven't seen that one, highly, highly recommend it. I'll put the link in the chat for you. It's coming up right there. So good information. So that was an extremely long answer to a fairly short question, but I hope I answered the question. The really short answer is yes, you need to do something else. And I'm not going to play the video. I just want to show the video to you. All right. Any other questions out there? Let's see. There is a question coming in from Facebook. It's from Dan. When deploying applications from Intune and the app deployment fails to an issue with detection rules, what's the best way to force the app to redeploy so you can check that the issue has been resolved? In my testing, I've just usually tried the reinstall option, which is usually available in Intune. Depends a little bit on what detection rule you have. I believe that Oliver had a, let's see if I can find that one. The Kieselbach, one of the highest ranked Intune experts out there. He did a behind the scenes investigation, what happens when Win32 apps are actually being run. Let's see if I can find that real quick. This was an interesting post. I will start by sharing this one. Not exactly related, but it gives you some other information about what's going on behind the scenes. I'll put that one in the chat for you, together with a link. All right, here is a thread I think can be useful for this particular question. So Win32 apps like PowerShell scripts is not really installed by the normal Windows 10 or Windows 11 MDM agent. It's a separate agent that gets installed the first time you publish or install an app or a script. And sometimes it's simple enough to just restart that service and it will kick in again. Sometimes resyncing policy forces the application to deploy again. What I found useful in my own testing is when testing the packages to deploy them to users rather than devices, and make it simply easier to just rerun them from the company portal as many times as I want. There are some other tips here as well. Have not tried this one, but apparently you can delete this grid and then force the apps to reevaluate it that way. So maybe this would be a good one. Any other questions? Probably put that link in the chat also. How rude not to. Coming up right now. Well, while we are waiting for more questions, I do have a shiny announcement. Just got it approved, but in December 21st, we're going to do a free mini course on everything related to peer-to-peer in ConfigMgr and Intune environments. So if you are struggling that autopilot deployments or Win32 apps deployment taking hours and hours and hours, this is an hour-and-a-half long session on what you can do to optimize performance for your ConfigMgr and your Intune deployments, covering connected cache servers, delivery optimization configurations, and basically tips and tricks that we found out over the last 2 years can optimize the performance when working with these platforms. So if you haven't signed up for this one, the price is just right. Just an hour-and-a-half webinar is being recorded if you cannot join, or if you want to repeat some of the demos that we do here. But it's me, Andreas, and Phil that's going to present this one. So I'll put that link in the chat for you. And hope to see you on that one. And apparently I cannot copy. Very good. I will learn to do that next Wednesday. All right. Any questions? Got a comment there? Webinar sounds awesome. Yeah, I believe it is. I happen to like working with peer-to-peer a lot. So yeah, it's fun. I think deployment is fun too, and I'm been told many times that you're not supposed to think it's fun, but I do think it's fun. So good stuff there. All right, anything else? We have at least half an hour to go. So if you have any more questions, feel free to put them in either the chat or on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. I'll be happy to answer. So question from Jason coming in. Let's see, on the topic of cleanup, how do you handle the year's worth of drivers from old hardware models? Cleaning up ConfigMgr and also network file shares. Well, in terms of drivers, it's actually that easy in a way, because a few years back, I completely stopped, and I mean completely stopped from a model point of view to work with driver packages like these guys. Instead, create regular packages with drivers rather than having driver packages. Because now you simply have a single source folder for every package. That also includes versioning names. And when I no longer need to support a specific model, I can simply just delete this package and I can delete the source folder that it belonged to, or move it away to an archive just to have it as a backup copy. The downside of importing drivers here into the repository is you simply just load the database. And even though you actually can find drivers, you can see what models they belong to, and you can go ahead and delete those. But this is the old way of doing things. You get so many more options available when you work with real legacy packages for your drivers or buyers for that matter. And you can create these packages manually. You can use solutions like the modern driver management from Maurice Daly and Nikolai Anderson, the MS Endpoint Manager team, or part of that team, because it makes it so easy to simply select the stuff you want, hit start download and import, and you walk away, and they show up nicely in ConfigMgr. This platform even supports piloting, so you can have a sequence where you test your pilot packages without interrupting production. And the best setting is this one here, ever. They allow you to compress the package into a Vim file. And when it's time to decommission that package, you just dank that folder and you're done. Because this really speeds up deployment. It makes peer-to-peer so much better. And if you guys are deploying from a cloud management gateway, where you're actually doing HTTPS deployments always and you are paying for download, well, it's simply faster to download a half gig Vim image versus a 1 gig package with like 1,000 small files. Not to mention it's going to take like 20 minutes to do that versus like 2 minutes to download the Vim file. To answer the question shorthand or try to summarize the answer, I recommend switching to a process where you have one package per model and you keep them versionized. And when it's time to decommission them, simply move the folders away or create an archive folder here and put the packages there. But if you don't longer have that hardware available, then there is little need to keep the packages on your site server and on your DFS share or wherever you're storing your source for your packages. So I hope I answered that question. And good question, by the way. Any other questions? All right, let's see. Here's a question. I'm moving the Windows Updates workload to Intune, but update compliance reporting in Intune leaves a lot to be desired. Do you know of any solutions that might be better? Unfortunately, I mean, for those of you that come from a ConfigMgr background, ConfigMgr has always, ever since back in the days, been pretty good on inventory, been pretty good on reporting, even compliance reporting. Intune has not been good on that and still is not good on that. So what happened in the last year now is that the community has actually stepped in and started to create really, really great solutions for this. And the best one by far that I've seen, at least, is from our friend, once again, over at Endpoint Manager. They recently published a downloadable workbook for, it's using update compliance in the backend, but this is downright amazing what they put together and made available for free. Because Intune on its own doesn't have this, but this is a good one. So if you haven't seen this one, then it's fairly easy to implement. And I'll put that link in the chat for you. All right, good question, thank you. Quite fun in a way. When Microsoft started to offering not on that server, they had to actually have it on the server. When they started to offering co-management back a few years back and started to add in more and more workloads. I did not expect software updates to be one of the first one to actually be moved, but this one has been quite popular. I would expect something else, but the reason for this is simplicity. Because ConfigMgr, as you know, software update in the platform is a lot of options. Sometimes more options than you actually need. And it can be quite complex to work with. And the Intune comparison is kind of night and day difference in simplicity. Sure, you don't have all the same knobs and whistles as you have in ConfigMgr, but it can do in some environments a pretty dang good job. For example, I know a lot of school education environments that are switching over from using software updates in ConfigMgr to using software updates in Intune instead. That's because they have a gazillion of students running around all over with their machines, and yeah, it's just easier. All right. Maze had a question regarding, okay, let's see. Can you please explain to us about OSD and how to capture the image? Well, first of all, these days you typically don't need to create reference images because due to hardware or better hardware, basically, better network, deployments that could take like an hour a few years back good Lord, how hard can it be to type network? Deployments that could take an hour may only take half an hour today. I was working with one customer up in Canada. They were adding in a bunch of apps, including thick Oracle clients, both 32 and 64-bit into the image. And the reason they did that was because it took so long time to deploy them a few years back, and they just continued to do it that way. But when I asked them to do a new measurement, it was now a 3-minute difference versus using a thin image versus using a thick image. So in general, the industry as a whole is moving away from thicker images into thinner images. And the benefit of that is that you can use the same image for all type of deployment scenarios. You can use it for bare metal, you can use it for refresh, replace, and even servicing these days. However, there are scenarios where you need one. And education is usually a classic scenario where you have a room full of computers where tomorrow morning there's going to be a lab of something. And you need to deploy an image to those machines and 50, 60, 70 applications. And you have a 2-hour window to do so. You simply can't. If you're installing the entire Autodesk suite and MATLAB and Adobe and whatnot, it's going to take hours and hours and hours unless you put them in an image. It could also be that you have real complex application installs like CAD engineering stations, developer stations like Visual Studio with 4,200 plugins that are configured. So thick images, normally not needed, but when you need them, it's usually because of those things: speed and complex apps. That's like the 2 main reasons I see out there for creating thick images. The way to create these guys, I recommend automation. So if I need a thick image with apps, I open up a PowerShell prompt. I go to a scripts folder that I have, and I run a PowerShell script, and I leave the building. I come back after an hour, and now on my server, I have a WIM file. So this concept of automating build and captures is called having an image factory. And these solutions typically use MDT in the background, MDT Light Touch, free download from Microsoft. But what it allows you to do is to spin up a server where you add in your applications that you want to have. You create sequences for your various type of operating systems that you want to create images of. And the ones that you do want to have images of all the time, you add a copy to a specific folder. So I have like 10 different Windows 10 sequences, but I have only 3 of them in my ref folder. So by running a PowerShell script and walk away, after a while, there will be 6 WIM files on the server. And these WIM files will have everything that I need. I have applications, they have Office, whatever I put in my sequence. And if someone asks you for documentation, this is the documentation. This is just the list of what's supposed to go into that image. These solutions has been developed by the community, a very good friend of mine, Michael Nystrom. He's been working on this one for probably 10 years now. The latest version is a few years old, but it's still rock solid, still works great. So if you haven't seen this solution that works with MDT, dang, this one is good. So if you need thicker images for whatever reason, I recommend using MDT in the backend, and I recommend using PowerShell to automate the build and capture the creation of those virtual machines so that you always can reproduce a deployment and image and knowing it will be equally good every single time. Let's see, that was a question regarding BIOS updates. I recommend using the same solution for that. So when using the modern driver management community solution, when you configure stuff, you can say that you want to download drivers, BIOS, or both. And then it's going to also create BIOS packages in ConfigMgr, and you simply deploy them to your machines with a script. So the beautiful thing about this platform is that you only need, once you set it up, the only thing you need to do is to add in more models as they come by, because this one takes care of creating the packages. And the script itself, let's see if I have here, I think I have an older. Looking for sequences in the packages folder. It's not working very well. I think it's more helpful if I actually go to the test sequence folder. Modern. Here we go. It's a classic one. So this is the entire script. PowerShell script that connects to the admin service in ConfigMgr, figures out what it needs, and that's it. And there is a similar script for BIOS. Not sure if I have it on this one, but I have it on, may have it on the other server. Yeah, I have the one for upgrading drivers. Server is a little bit busy at the moment. I have a ton of VMs running right now, so I'll give it a chance to bundle up. I mean, you must have at least 4 different ConfigMgr servers running at each time. That's a rule in a lab, I think. Come on, ConfigMgr, be nice. Usually the trick, if you're waiting for something in ConfigMgr, is to look away, because then it's immediately gonna do it. But this is a different switch to the script. This is a sequence that I can push out to upgrade existing computers in the environment, but it's using the same packages, the same logic to detect them, and you can have the same thing for BIOSes. So down here, I actually have a script that I'm using for, or not a script, a sequence that I'm using for BIOS updates. And this script, I can either pixie boot and do a BIOS update of any machine that I just want to do the BIOS update of. I can push out this one to existing machines, or I can add it to a sequence that I'm using for servicing. I do, however, prefer to do it separately, because a BIOS update as well as servicing are 2 actions that have to be tested quite well, and they can be quite destructive. So I recommend to use them as separate tasks. But anyhow, this is just a script that, in this case for Dell machines, will upgrade into the latest BIOS. There is a script also for Microsoft, for HP, and for Lenovo in this. Maurice recently published version 7 of the driver automation tool that has Windows 11 support. However, the script that applies them is not yet done, and I was told it was going to work with this this Friday, actually. So hopefully, we'll get a nice Christmas gift from Maurice and Nikolai, and we'll have a full Windows 11 support in the platform as well. So I hope that answered the question on BIOS and driver updates. As you probably know, Microsoft is working on a deployment service. Where BIOS. Here we go. That's the original post. I want to find the one from November. Skip Night. Really good in finding that one. Shall I really be forced? The one. All right, I'll show you this one for now. This one covers it nicely as well, but Microsoft is working on a new deployment service to do driver and firmware updates directly from Intune and using Microsoft Update as a mechanism to deliver those updates. But in addition to the current on-off switch, you will have better control on what drivers that goes out when in the environment. So this is something that's been working on the entire year in private previews, and I'm very much looking forward to see this in general availability now in 2022. Even though it's just a preview, we're fun to play around with. But they got the big vendors on board. They have HP, Lenovo, and Dell. And down later in this post, there's a ton of videos where you can watch and see what's going on here for these scenarios. So I'll put this link in the chat. All right, let's see. There was another question regarding how to connect to virtual machines using tools like either RDCman or Remote Desktop Manager. In this case, I really like this tool. Even the free version is just great. This happened to be a paid one, but even the free version they have is just downright amazing. To connect the VMs, it usually just comes down to having a good router in the environment that can route the traffic in between them, so you can do a regular RDP session into them. And have local DNS servers to do name resolution. What I have running in my lab here is I happen to be a big fan of pfSense. So I have multiple pfSense routers running. My biggest one is this one here. And this one is routing 6 different lab networks together. One is there for internet access, and the others are to simulate different time of speed, latency, package loss, and other configurations. As you can see here, I have a ton of clients in Chicago. They are throttled behind the WAN link. I have a bunch of machines in Seattle. They are throttled, but they're not really in Seattle. They are right here, but they are different subnets, and I'm using the router to make sure that not only can I talk to the right servers, but also my management tools can talk to them. So by tricking Hyper-V a little bit and this tool by adding a little bit of routing in your own lab environment, I've been able to successfully use this one to deploy, connect to the right servers. So I hope that answered that question. If you're new to pfSense, I do have a blog post on how to set up one real quick. This is for the free community edition, but this is just perfect to have in a lab environment. Shameless plug. Also, we have a free mini course coming up in January for this one, where we spend an hour and a half on setting up a lab environment. So if you didn't attend the one that we did in early November, I believe it was, maybe, yeah, early November, you have a chance to attend this one and simple as signing up and join when it starts. And we spent 90 minutes building lab environments for ConfigMgr and MDT and Intune and other fun things. All right. Good questions. Any other questions? Let's see, a question from Jason here. I11 finally going away. Yep, that's a nice touch of things. Anybody else getting ready for that is the question. I haven't been involved in much project for that lately. I'm assuming you mean for the Windows 11 changes, and that's primarily because Windows 11 isn't really quite ready for production deployments. There are still a few issues that need to be ironed out, and we're still waiting for vendors to actually provide drivers for it also. That would be nice. But I haven't seen any good resources on that topic. What do happens is that you can still configure these policies for similar to enterprise management, where Edge will render pages as if they were Internet Explorer without being an Internet Explorer. And there are some policies you can set as well to basically force them to open up in Edge, which is usually recommended. There's a question I don't quite get. There is many apps creating shortcuts and running in the background once you log in. How to stop that? Okay, if I mean, you can definitely borrow tools like sysinternals. Their suite that you can download for free from their site. They do have the auto runs application. This will give you a good idea about what's actually going on the system, and you can go ahead and remove stuff that you absolutely don't want. So if you do have machines that are loading a lot of junk, crapware, whatnot, when you start them, this is a really good tool to figure out what that is. So yeah, hopefully this one can help. If you're talking about application installs, so this application is called Autoruns. It's available for download on sysinternals.com, which is Microsoft these days. So you can search for Autoruns here, or you can download the entire suite and get everything in one single download that is like 20 megs in size or something like that, 25. So not very big. But this one is great site. I've been using these tools for a very long time, even before they were Microsoft. Procmon, Process Explorer, PSExec, the good stuff. It's just amazing tool set, also available for free. If you have questions on application installs, to clean up, you usually have to use a bit of PowerShell wrappers or something like that, unless the installer support those switches. There used to be, back in the dark ages, a site called AppDeploy that was recently acquired by, not recently, it was acquired by Case and then somebody else. But there is a new one, Silent Install HQ or something like that. It was this one. Yeah, so this one is a knowledge base articles where you simply search for the application in question. I don't know, Adobe Reader. And you get a good chunk of tips and tricks and scripts. No, thank you. on how to deal with them. And often it comes back to simple things like, that's not simple, but having scripts that does certain things. This is a parent view plugin that I needed to install at some point, but this one, the installer wasn't very great. You needed to copy some files before you can run it. Then you need to run the setup, and you need to wait for it was done, because it was basically lying to you and saying, I'm done, when it wasn't really done. And then there was some stuff that you needed to do afterwards in the registry for this application. And you can put all that into a wrapper, and rather than installing the MSI, you install or run the wrapper as the installer. And this is something you can do in both ConfigMgr and Intune. I've been using that a lot to create test packages that just run script through Intune as a Win32 app. So that works nicely. ConfigMgr is easy. You just do a PowerShell .exe file and the name of the file. In Intune, you would have to get a little bit creative. And when you create those applications, you will see that the command line for them is going to be basically this. So instead of pointing it to the file when you create the package, you run the script. So that works. Jason added in the PS App Deployment Toolkit is also fantastic. I saw recently people actually started to use that with Intune to get some sort of progress bar during the enrollment status page. But the App Deployment Toolkit is great. This is the site. It's been around for many years. Really, really good. I'll put that link in the chat for you guys. Oh, nice. Let's see, we have a question on, two questions on YouTube coming in. Good documentation on exporting sequences and importing them again. Lately, ConfigMgr, especially in 2103, actually had a bug on exporting, importing sequences. I believe that was fixed in the latest rollup for 2107. But there was a bug when exporting, importing sequences. But I have done that lately. I did that as like me and Andrew was running a course 2 weeks ago, and we did an app export there, and it worked just fine. There are two ways of doing exports. Either you can just go to sequences and export them out here, zip file, or you can do a PowerShell equivalent and just dump the XML files out. I'm still using event handlers in ConfigMgr that will, every time I do a change in a sequence, it spits out a copy of that sequence. So I will always have an archive, different versions of my sequences that I can very easily either review or simply restore if needed using PowerShell. So restoring a single XML file is quicker than restoring an entire site server just because you want a sequence back. So documentation for it was Mike Costa that wrote this utility. I believe he still has its site up and running. Haven't talked with him in a bit. This one. Even though it was done for 2012, it's still valid for current branch. So I will put that in the chat as well. Let's see if I can get it out into the YouTube comment also. Looked like it worked. All right. Mike had a question: when ConfigMgr restarts after patching, if Outlook was running, it restarts before VPN. Is there a better way to simulate a shutdown -R instead of doing a shutdown /G? The only way I have seen is to launch basically additional shutdown tools for it. I know CT Global had one that they've been using or published for a few times. It's called Cortex shutdown tool from the time they were named Cortex. I have seen some toast notification solutions from Martin in Denmark. But ConfigMgr doesn't have too many options of changing the behavior of restarts because they're still using their own little shutdown tool. They're not using the native Windows one for it. So if anyone else have any ideas and comments, feel free to put them in the chat or reply on the YouTube channel there. But yeah, don't have more than that, I think. All right, 2 more minutes. The final questions? Doesn't look like much. See a few spam comments coming in, but that's the usual fun stuff when you do public things on YouTube. Can I explain to go through the hydration lab? Well, if you don't mind waiting until next year, we have an 1.5-hour session dedicated to just that. If you need to get something going already now over Christmas, we actually kept the one I did last month around. So this one here, if you sign up for that one, again, it's free. You can watch the recording from it, and it will take you through a hydration lab setup end to end. So 2 options there. Either watch the recording with Ed, or maybe it was October, I don't remember, or you wait until the next one. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, but since we are preparing a longer session that takes care of everything, most of the good stuff will be in that one. All right. It is almost time. And of course, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for all the good questions. And what we've done for December is, can actually go back to the main page to the office hours. See if I can find them here. We are running next Wednesday on our normal time, but then we also have 22nd and 29th where we run them in the morning so that people in Europe have a fighting chance of joining without having to stay up until midnight. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you guys again next Wednesday. Thank you.